I don't know if you know this, but you're being lied to right to your face. When you watch TV, movies, news, and even when you listen to your politicians speak, what I mean is that they lie to you about Mexico and Mexican people all the time. They say it's dangerous and full of criminals here, and it's a place where nothing normal happens. So, in this video, I'm going to explore with you why the US needs you to believe these things for more money, power, and control, and most of all, why they're full of. So, what I think is important to understand first is this: most people from the US don't just wake up one day and decide that Mexico is just one huge mess. It's more like background coding, like a coding in the background of your mind, in your brain. And it's slowly created over time without any of us even noticing. From the time we were all little, Mexico showed up in small, scary pieces. Have you noticed it? If not, it's okay because I didn't notice it. I didn't notice that it was this automatic coding inside of me until the first day that I landed in Mexico City and stepped off the plane. But first of all, I want to just clarify something. The coding is the same in my brain, even though I'm Canadian. As we grow up, we learn these things about Mexico too, and we believe them. What I think is that we get too much news and media that leaks over the border. Anyways, I was 37 years old when I realized that my thoughts about Mexico were completely wrong. Yeah, it's actually pretty embarrassing. Afterwards, though, after I figured all this out, that my thoughts were wrong, I got super curious to figure out why this was a thing and how someone like me, who has traveled the world so much and should know better, fell for it. I started to think about it and I realized that we see it everywhere, on our TVs, on our phones, on social media, every single place that we look. We even see it in the movies when we go to the theater to watch with our friends and family. What happens is they constantly show that Mexico is always loud, dangerous, and super chaotic. It's made this place where things go wrong all the time, everywhere, for no reason whatsoever. And after years of this type of brainwash, your brain connects all those little moments together and just assumes that this is what Mexico's like. Think about it. What do our brains do all day? What is our brain constantly trying to do? Obviously, for some of us, not think. But all jokes aside, what it tries to do is simplify everything. It tries to make everything simple for us to understand, as simple as possible. And we like to keep things as simple as possible. But the problem with this thing that we do in our heads, is that nothing is simple and nothing is just black and white. But what we've done with Mexico was we made the story simple. So Mexico feels unstable and chaotic to most of us outside of the country, most of us that have never been here. And in that case, it must be dangerous and chaotic everywhere, even though it's a huge country with over 100 million people in it, well over 100 million people. So everything in Mexico, it has to be the same, right? But no, you can't just color Mexico with one dark red crayon and call it a no-go zone, can you? And if not, why do news, movies, and politicians act like this is true about Mexico? Well, first, what it does is make the US seem like it's the normal one. That's the purpose of this story. Makes it seem like it's the safe place, the only place where everything makes sense, and the only place people can go without struggling, without having to struggle or seeing struggle, which is completely wrong. And this story of contrast is that Mexico is bad and the US is good. And we make this story super simple, even if it doesn't make sense or it doesn't make complete sense whatsoever. It's a story where everything is put in black and white, one piece at a time, repeated slowly over years until it doesn't feel like a false story anymore. It feels like the truth. And when those things start to feel like common sense to you, you usually stop questioning it because it is what it is. So it must be the truth. And people start to believe these things and say things out loud without even actually checking if it's true or not. Or the craziest part, never stepping on Mexican soil, not even 1 foot. And they think they know what's going on. They think they know what's going on before they truly get to know a real life Mexican person. Or even at minimum, and I mean minimum, not even tried real authentic Mexican tacos. Because Taco Bell isn't real Mexican food. People, they just talk. they talk a lot without thinking, or they comment a lot without thinking online. That's for sure. Because a lot of people leave a lot of weird comments on my in my comment section. I'm sure I can check this video soon and it will have a lot of weird comments on it. Maybe not a lot, but it will have a couple. Okay. So what's the real story about Mexico then? That all depends, really. For most of the country, it's just normal everyday life. Did you know that the middle class here is exploding at rates that Mexico has never seen before? No, I don't think you did. I'm not going to talk about it in detail right now because I actually made a video about that not too long ago, and I'll link it in the description so you can watch it after you finish this video. So, since the story that Mexico's so bad has been pounded in your head for so long, it feels strange to stop and really look at what's actually happening here. And when I say look, I don't mean zooming in on the headline of the week, the scariest headline of the week. I mean paying attention to what life actually looks like. In most parts of Mexico, now this might surprise a few of you, life feels normal. It's not perfect here, but most of the country is just normal. Like in the way everyone else in the world thinks what normal is. People wake up early, people complain about being tired, they rush to work, they get annoyed by traffic, kids worry about homework, and parents and adults, they worry about money and bills. Yeah, believe it or not, it's that normal here. If you spend enough time in Mexico and spend less time watching scary headlines on the news, you start noticing that the scary story you've been believing for so long starts to feel a little weird and off. Now, here's the part where things need to change in your mind if they haven't yet. It's not about completely erasing everything in your mind that you have about Mexico and just putting your guard down and trusting everything and everybody here when you come. Because, of course, Mexico has places you shouldn't go and things you shouldn't be doing here. All countries have this. But what I'm trying to get at is that it's not about one country is good and one country is bad. People act like life is some sort of storyline from an old Wild West movie where there's a good guy and a bad guy. And it's not that simple. Life is never that simple. What this is about is more about realizing how our brains are trained to react differently to the same kind of events that happen in the US versus when they happen in Mexico. When something violent happens in Mexico, it's usually talked about like it's explained that the whole country is chaotic and violent. It's painted with one big, huge, wide brush of danger. Like this country is really tiny and it's made up of one neighborhood or town. And it becomes easy for people to start saying things like, see, that's how Mexico is. Or what I hear a lot in comments is that Mexico is a failed state, whatever that means. As if one moment in one place in this gigantic country tells you the whole story. Like it tells you everything you need to know about Mexico. And somehow, when these stories are told so much, the place itself becomes the problem. But then, when something violent happens in the United States, it seems like those same people and politicians and news channels quickly change their mind about the conversation just to benefit themselves. Suddenly, it's all about reasons, the place, the details. People talk about mental health, laws, and history. Or sometimes they even say it's just a big misunderstanding. They don't label the whole entire country like they label Mexico when these things happen. Not even close. But here's what I think is important. It isn't so much how often these dangerous situations happen. It's about how the story around it is framed. One country ends up being the crazy, scary bad guy that everyone's afraid of, while the other sounds like a complicated but familiar, imperfect, like superhero or something like that. Like one that will always save the day. This big contrast becomes really hard to ignore because you realize that fear isn't coming from facts. It's coming from the way the story's told and who's telling it. Once you know that these stories aren't always completely true, you might start asking yourself, why do I keep hearing them then? And the answer isn't some big scary secret that we shouldn't know. It's actually kind of boring, to be honest. But that's why it works so well. Stories that make people afraid are really useful. It's actually unreal how useful they can be. They grab your attention fast. And attention is very valuable these days, especially nowadays with things like social media. To make profits, obviously news and social media channels and companies need to get people to watch. And believe it or not, fear sells the best. It keeps your eyes glued to the screen way better than any other feeling can, especially way better than calm and normal, because no one cares about that. No one. People want to see things that make them feel better about their crappy lives. To be honest, I tried using some of these tactics in this video right here just to get you to click and watch. But the difference is that I try to tell the truth and not just lie for my benefit. So when life at home feels overwhelming, expensive, confusing, or out of your control, like inflation, bills, pressure at work, or just any type of uncertainty whatsoever, your brain wants relief. But solving those problems takes energy, responsibility, and a ton, and I mean a ton, of emotional effort. So instead, the mind does something super sneaky. Sneaky, but is very efficient. It looks outside the bubble. It finds other places, groups, or situations and says, at least I'm not dealing with that. And what this does is lower anxiety, restores sense of control, gives your nervous system a short mental vacation, and it lets you avoid sitting with your problems you can't immediately fix or don't want to fix. It feels like progress in your brain, but it's actually emotional self regulation. The main psychology term of this is downward social comparison, which means your brain compares your situation to something that looks worse so you feel better. This all makes the world feel more organized, with danger clearly somewhere else. And what I really want to stress is that this doesn't require anyone to lie on purpose. It's more like a system that rewards the loudest, scariest version of the story. Over time, the same images and phrases get reused, like Mexico is a failed state, which makes it sound like it's out of control and dangerous here. Okay, this is where things about Mexico get kind of sneaky. But once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. A lot of fear comes from how information is grouped together, not just from what actually happened. And maps are a big part of that. People have been using maps as weapons for centuries now, and the USA is no different. For a long time, haven't just been used to help people find places. They've been used to shape how people feel about other places too. Powerful countries would color the other lands, like other places around the world, as dark, dangerous, or messy, just to make them seem scary or out of control. It's a serious tactic. While their own areas were colored in or drawn very calm, safe, and organized and nice. And this tactic is called visual framing. When the news shows violence in Mexico, it often uses scary looking maps. Whole states or regions get colored in like they're dangerous everywhere, all the time. And this is simple information for your brain to understand. But simple isn't how the world really works, is it? What really happens is that specific events from specific locations get pulled all together and shown all at once. Different cities, different times, and different situations are all mashed together into one picture. And that picture is just Mexico. And meanwhile, all the other days where nothing bad happened don't make it into the news at all. No one wants to see a normal, safe morning commute to work. In the United States, the same kind of violence is usually shown very differently. Stories are broken apart. They're labeled by city or neighborhood. The country itself doesn't get shaded in with one big permanent red marker. Now, did you know that there were over 500 mass shootings in the USA in 2024 alone? That's an incident where four or more people were shot. But see, without context, it just sounds like all of the USA is super dangerous, right? What I really want you to notice is this. Your fear level changes based on how these stories are only one sided. Once you understand that, you realize that things like maps aren't just for directions, but they can be used as weapons to secretly scare you deep down inside your brain. So, all this talk about stories and maps might sound a little bit abstract, but it actually affects real people in real ways that matter a lot. And if we're not careful, this situation can get very dangerous. And it has for many, many people, many Mexicans in the past. If you dehumanize a group of people for long enough, those people could be facing some serious danger. Just look how Trump talks about Mexico and how he says that he will invade. And if he does, this won't end well for both sides. Many, many people on both sides. I think what gets lost is how tiring this can be. Imagine being a regular person going to work, taking care of your family, and worrying about bills and realizing that people not too far away from you think you're just a monster. That's not fair. And they think you're a monster because not because these people know you, but because they've been shown the same scary images over and over again on their TV screen. This changes how people are treated, especially when others come to visit Mexico. There are these stories that are floating around on the internet that entitled US visitors in Mexico are yelling at people for not speaking English and treating Mexicans like they're the help. And the treatment gets worse. People comment horrible things about Mexico online, and they haven't even been here ever. There's a whole list of comments on my past videos where people say horrible things about Mexico that I haven't even experienced. And I lived here longer than 2 years now. You can't sit there and say these things that are being said about Mexicans aren't causing them to build up some resentment. Resentment about foreigners who come here, because it is. A lot of them seem fed up about the lies and nonsense that are being spread about them. The messed up part is that these stories erase normal life in Mexico and erase normal people too. And it's important to say clearly, Mexicans aren't asking for pity. They're asking to be seen properly, to be understood as people living full, complex lives, not as characters inside of someone else's fear based horror story. No, so stop it. Now, here's the part that surprised me the most when I really thought about it. This story doesn't just affect Mexico and Mexican people, it changes the people in the USA too. Not for the better. When you grow up hearing that certain places are dangerous, your brain learns to replace curiosity with caution. Instead of wondering what life was like somewhere else, like in Mexico, you automatically imagine the worst. And after a while, you think you know without actually knowing. Like you're being smart, even when you're repeating something you were just taught that isn't true. Over time, it seems to me like people start relying on headlines to decide how the world actually works. If something sounds scary enough and it gets repeated enough, it starts to feel true without having to be checked. This way of thinking and fact checking also shrinks how people see the world. The world is complex, like I said. It's not black and white. What people don't realize is that fear is addictive. Giving simple answers to complicated questions makes you feel informed, even when you're missing a lot of the context around it. And media systems are built to reward that feeling because it keeps people watching and scrolling. And more watching and more scrolling means more advertisement money for these companies. So just remember that. If you made it this far in this video, I'm sure you liked it, which means you might like my other videos because I have many more, like this one right here. This is called, Is Mexico Safe in 2026? Everything you've been told is wrong. Click it, check it out, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.